Good morning. So I want to begin by asking Stav to reenact or at least describe something she did recently in the Knesset, which is about 3 weeks ago, you gave a speech about Zionism, which is available on YouTube and does have subtitles if you need it. But will you take a minute, and if you can give us a little bit of the speech in English, we'd love that. Or if not, at least describe your message and what you were trying to convey.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Well, my speech was actually trying to explain the process that happened to the Israeli right over the years. You know, in Israel, it's very common these days to talk about the collapse of the progressive camp, the Israeli progressive camp, the Israeli left. But actually, I think that the political camp that really collapsed in the last few years is the right. The right has been in government for the past 40 years. Most of these 40 years, it was right-wing governments. There were a few very, very short episodes of progressively led governments, but most of the time it was right-wing. Throughout the 40 years, the right brought Israel to a negative record of socioeconomic gaps. Israel is today, from a country that used to be in the 70s one of the most equal countries, today is one of the least equal countries with enormous socioeconomic gaps. It privatized much of our education, public education system, of our healthcare system, of our welfare system. It broke the middle class. And the only reason that the right kept winning was because of its security paradigm. People trusted the right to lead us on the security aspect. But what we see in the last few years is a collapse of that security ideas as well. It's been 6 years that Netanyahu is in government, that the right is in government. The wave of terror that Israel is confronting in the last few weeks is painful and is the proof of why managing the conflict over the long term or bringing Israel to a situation of a binational state is going to destroy our country. And, you know, last week it was 20 years to Yitzhak Rabin's murder. Interestingly, the right is still blaming Yitzhak Rabin for our lack of security. 20 years later, it's still blaming the left and the progressive camp. Now, the right, all of that time, the right kept saying the Oslo agreements were a huge mistake. The evacuation, the disengagement from Gaza was an enormous mistake. We should have kept Gush Katif in Gaza. Settlements are Israel's security. That's what we keep hearing. Now, the right has been in government for all of those years. If they wanted to annex the settlements, they could have done that. If they wanted to rebuild Gush Katif in Gaza, they could have done that. If they wanted to break every security cooperation that we have with Mahmoud Abbas and with the Palestinian Authority, they could do that. They have a majority. But the fact is that they don't do it because they know that this is nonsense. They know that this is a horrible mistake. They know that we will lose the game if we do that. So what we see is a collapse of all the ideas, all the security ideas that the right has been selling Israelis all over these years.
And tell the audience specifically what you said about Zionut, Zionism, and Siniut, cynicism.
You know, what happened, because the right knew that it lost, that all of its security ideas are just a big mistake, and this is clear. It's not for nothing that Netanyahu is keep talking about a two-state solution. He knows that a one-state and a binational state will destroy Israel as we know it. But because they can't fight this argument, the biggest argument that Israel has, and that's the argument over territories, over the territories. And because it can't fight the argument, they try to break the argument and to delegitimize the other side, the progressive side. So it's been years that what we hear is that the left is going to bring ISIS to Jerusalem and comparing left-wing politicians to Hamas terrorists and telling all of these horrifying stories about the other side in order to delegitimize it. And this cynicism is destroying the basic of the Zionist idea, because all through the years that Israel existed, before Israel was established, we always had a discussion and an argument over the direction of Zionism. And there were always a few sides to that. But what the right is doing now is to just destroy the other side completely in order to remove the other side from the discussion, to not have the discussion. That's because they know that they're wrong. What we have to do, I think, in the progressive camp, and this is our mission for the coming years, is to reclaim Zionism, to reclaim the basic notions of Zionism. And the Zionist ideas and the founding fathers and mothers of our country came to Israel with this huge dream, and they made the impossible happen. When I think about my grandparents and what they had to do in order to build a country that I was very lucky to be born in, it's incredible. They made a legend, a story, a dream. They made it come true. Zionism is all about courage. It's about taking the dreams that people have, that our nation, that our people had for so many years, and make them come true. Find the most pragmatic ways of making them come true. And Zionism was always about, it was about building a home for the Jewish people in Israel, but not only that. It was about building a home that put the human being at the center, building communities that have solidarity. That's why in Israel, the social ideas of public education system and welfare system are so common. 90% of Israelis still agree to that, even after 40 years of right-wing governments. 90% of Israelis joined our protest movement 4 years ago because they know that Israel is about that. It's about solidarity, it's about equality, it's about tikkun olam in its most pragmatic essence, to really be a light, to really practice what we believe in reality. And this is Zionism. That's why Zionism can only exist and can only be alive if we finally define our borders and start to take care of our society and start to take all of these dreams that our society have and really make them come true.
So, Ari, let's talk about a column you wrote just yesterday in Haaretz. You wrote, "Unconsciously and unintentionally, the right has become a serious threat to the future of diaspora Jewry." In other words, you're saying the Israeli right is a threat to the people in this room. Will you explain what you meant?
First of all, I'm afraid I agree with myself. Unlike most Jews. But let me say, first of all, how thankful I am. First of all, I feel privileged to sit here, and I'm thankful to all of you. And I cannot escape the thought. When I was a young paratrooper, I will never forget a Shabbat when the commander of our regiment in Bikat HaYarden told us, "Guys, during this Shabbat, you are the only thing that Am Israel has that will protect Jerusalem." It was a different age, era. There was an Iraqi army, a Syrian army. It was dangerous. And that sense of responsibility never left me. When I walked into the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati a year ago, I looked at the young rabbinical students, and I felt exactly the same. And this is what I feel here today. What is giving hope, what is defending the Jewish future, are the people studying in Cincinnati and Los Angeles and New York, and the people sitting here. This is just as important as the Israeli Air Force. And I care very much. I want a very strong Air Force. But the Jewish future will not only be decided on the borders of Gaza and Lebanon, but with you people doing the sacred work you are doing to guarantee a Jewish future. Sadly, the Israeli right, my government, do not understand that. I'm a passionate Zionist, just like Stav. I think Israel is a miracle. It's a miracle because it's a home for a homeless people, because it lives under the volcano and it survives and thrives under the volcano, and it's a miracle because it's a democracy. But the other Jewish miracle of the last century is you, the perfect diaspora you created here. These two miracles, these two amazing achievements of the Jewish people, especially in the post-Holocaust era, are so wondrous but challenged. And they both need each other. We have no future without you, and you do not have a future without us. When Israel becomes a settler Israel, when Israel is perceived as an ultra-Orthodox Israel that rejects progressive values, that is not about social justice, that alienates young American Jews and non-Jews, it betrays its fundamental mission. Israel is all about not only being a light unto the nations, but being a light unto the diaspora. Our main mission, this amazing movement that is represented here, that assembles here, went parallel and then joined Zionism. We both face the same challenge because we all want to be Jewish, but in a different way than their own way. The only way to have modern, relevant, non-Orthodox Judaism in the 21st century and beyond is to have a deep link, a deep alliance between you and us. And Israel has been betraying, under the right-wing governments, has been betraying that mission. What troubles me most, with all the dangers we face, the real iceberg there is a clash with the zeitgeist, with the 21st century values. If we lose the millennials, if we lose the young Jews who care about human rights and justice, and if Israel is perceived as an ultra-Orthodox and ultra-nationalist entity, we endanger our soul and we endanger your future. So I'll end it. I'm a Bitronist. I care so much about Israel's security. But the real battle is the battle for our soul. There is a deep battle for Israel's soul, and there is a deep battle for the soul of your younger generation. We must win this battle, and this is what we must work together and forge the lines between you and us so we can make Israel again the benign Israel that it must be, and we can guarantee the future of this great community.
So in preparation for this panel, I solicited questions from a few of you in the audience because I was very aware of the fact that there is a fair amount of diversity of political viewpoint in this room, and I wanted to reflect that. But interestingly, the same question came back again and again and again, and that's the one I'd like to put to you, Eric. This is in the words of David Kasikoff, who is one of my fellow congregants at Congregation Beth Elohim in Brooklyn. He said, as did many people, what should congregations do to support a democratic, pluralistic Israel?
First of all, I'm listening to these words and I'm saying, how can we not be optimistic about Israel's future? And amidst all the things that we face day after day, listen to these voices and be profoundly encouraged. Our task is threefold in our congregations, in the American Jewish community. First of all, we need to immerse ourselves in Israel, all aspects of Israel. Israel can't just be a cause, it has to be a place. And so the smells and the sounds and the food and the music and so on, that has to be part of our reality. If we're immersed in Israel, if we go to Israel, if we experience Israel, then it is easier for us to talk, and we can talk from love. And when we talk from love, people are more inclined to listen. So that's first of all. Second of all, we need to defend Israel more aggressively. Defend Israel more. We didn't hear this. Rabbi Jacobs mentioned it last night, but it needs to be said. The Palestinian national movement is not doing what it needs to do. It's often been a ruthless and a bloody and a stupid national movement, not serving its people. And so we need to look them in the eye, and we need to say, we know you're suffering, and we know you're hurting, and we know there can't be dignity for Israel without dignity for the Palestinians, but no more excuses, no more killing, no more terror, no more stabbings, enough. And we will not exempt them from the rules that bind all of humanity. We will not patronize them in that way. But, third of all, final point, we need to criticize more honestly. No whitewashing. So we've heard some points here. And there are certain things we have to say, and let's be honest, we don't say them clearly enough, emphatically enough. We're too worried about others. So what are those things? We need 2 states. We need 2 states for 2 people. We need to put an end to the madness of this settlement policy. We need to put an end to it. We need to say that. We need to say that the settlers are the NRA of Israel. And the settler leaders, they have a narrow vision and they forget the whole. They forget what's good for the people as a whole. And final point, we need to be much more emphatic, picking up on Ari's point, about religious freedom, about religious democracy. No, we're not apologetic here. Israel is the state of the Jewish people. You can't invite us to the Zionist party and then say, sit in the corner and be quiet. And the notion that some people stood at Sinai and some others did not. We expect the state of Israel to have an inclusive approach to Jews everywhere, to be our partners in teaching Torah, including a liberal Torah. This notion that somehow the souls of Reformed Jews are to be excluded from the holy sites in Jerusalem and from a full religious life is unacceptable. So we need to say that clearly, and we have to say to other American Jewish organizations, all of them, ADL and AIPAC and Federation and AJC, and there is some progress here, but not nearly enough. You need to join us. You can't stand aside in the battle for religious rights.
So, Ari, you've done an interesting thing since you published the book, My Promised Land, something that I wouldn't have anticipated, which is you've become obsessed, in your own words, with one setting in America, and that's the campus. And I think your work mirrors the concerns of a lot of people in this room who are sending kids to college and who are worried for a variety of very nuanced reasons about what their kids are going to confront there. Can you talk a little bit about the work you've done on college campuses and what you've discovered there?
Absolutely. As you say, I'm obsessed with this. I think it's the most important issue. As of all the challenges facing the Jewish people, I think the most important is this one. So let me analyze how I see it. When I came to this country in a more intensive way after the publication of the book, really the first shock I had is how amazing this universe you created is. And I think we should not just, I agree, we should fight for Israel and we should criticize the Palestinians when they are wrong. We should appreciate what was created here. We should not be apologetic about so-called Jewish power. We are a minority. And what you've created as a minority in this country, with the movements, with the congregations and federations and organizations, this universe based on voluntary values is amazing. And it should be an inspiration to any other minority in this country and elsewhere. The challenge, the existential challenge to this community and to the Jewish people is the generation gap in your community. And we have to be honest about it. By and large, people over 70 have the Holocaust as their context and are religiously committed to Jewish life in Israel. By and large, people over 50 remember pre-67 Israel and have a strong Jewish identity, and they whine and grind, they cannot help it. By and large, people under 30 are in a different world. They are challenged like we were never challenged before. So many of them love Israel. They want to love Israel. So many of them, their Jewish identity means a lot to them. But there is a deep problem. I come from the front. I've been on 10 campuses in the last 2 weeks. I've been in 40 campuses in the last year. And the conversations I have in campuses are heartbreaking. And I ask all you here, rabbis, leader, we must listen to the young people, we must respect them, and we must understand where they are. So there is so much talk of BDS. Let me tell you where things are, as I see it, what I hear. BDS is a vicious organization. It has anti-Semitic elements, and I fight it with all, in whatever way I can. But we have two other major problems. One is this deep tension, the contradiction sometimes, between the progressive values of 80-90% of young American Jews and the way Israel perceived, and sometimes the way the communities perceive. The other issue is apathy. Because Israel became so toxic, and sometimes because people are ambivalent about their Judaism, they stay away. The tension, the progressive Israel tension, and the apathy trouble me more than BDS. What does BDS do? It's a small organization, but it has a sophisticated strategy. It builds alliances with minority groups. By that, they multiply their power, and they put the young Jewish liberals in a problem because they're blamed of being racist. We must change that. Not only that we must change Israel, so it's in inspiring Israel, but we must reach out to other minorities in this country. We must change the way Jews are perceived. There is the problem of Israel being unjustified way perceived as a Goliath. I tell you, there is a more sensitive problem. Sometimes the American Jewry is perceived as a Goliath. We have to understand that we have to rewrite our narrative. We have to do it in Israel, and we have to do it here, and we have to do it together. As I said before, what troubles me more than anything, I'm telling you, the problem is not only swastikas in UC Davis. I was in UC Davis 2 weeks ago, and it's horrible. The problem is this thousands of people that I listen to that are so confused. We've not given them a meaningful Israel narrative, and in many ways they are so lost. They want, now it's not the good energy is there. We can do things. But later on, I would love to say we must put Israel and the Jewish cause on the right side of history. If we are perceived as associated with darker forces, we are endangering our young, we are endangering our future.
So I want to ask all three of you a practical question, which is, where do you think Israel education should begin? Congregations are starting to educate kids about Israel at the age 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. The way many of us were brought up is that we were taught the classical Zionist story, and then the complications were sort of reserved for later. That was for high school, if you stayed in Hebrew school for high school, which most people didn't. Do you think that children who are first learning about Israel should learn the kind of heroic version of the Zionist story, or should they learn what we might call the Ari Shavit, My Promised Land Junior Edition, in which the Zionist story is told with a lot of contradiction and pain and complexity and nuance and critique baked in? And I'd like to hear from all three of you briefly. Eric, do you want to start?
You don't begin with politics. You can't teach a 5-year-old about settlements, and you can't teach them about Lida, and you simply cannot. You begin with family, because the Jewish people is a single family, and you can teach children what it means to be part of this greater family, a family that extends to our synagogue, that extends to the American community, that extends to Jews around the world. And then you do some of those things that I was saying before. You teach them all the wonderful and heroic things that happen in the state of Israel. And the politics comes later, when they're ready for it, when they're immersed, when they have some sense of what it means to be a Jew and to be a Zionist. Don't start with the bad. Start with the good. And by the way, I'm somewhat more optimistic than Ari is here. Let's remember the success of Birthright. Let's remember the success of Birthright and what we heard on Wednesday night. 500,000 have gone on Birthright, most of them from North America, not all. Young people, and despite everything, the experience of Israel, being immersed in Israel, meeting Israelis who share these concerns, makes a tremendous difference. Family, connection, Israeli society, the good and the positive, and then we teach honestly and openly about the problems, because there's no family in the world that doesn't have problems, and, you know, the difficult uncle and, you know, the angry grandfather or whatever. There's not a family in the world that doesn't have those problems. We can talk about that as well at the appropriate time.
Stav, what do you think?
Well, I think it's actually quite easy. We only need to tell the truth. Judaism is very much an activist religion, or a religion of activist people. And in our history, there is so much to be proud of. Here in the United States, you have so much to be proud of. The cooperation and the leadership of civil rights movements, and that were some of the most beautiful things about the Jewish progressive and reform movement in the United States. We have so much to tell about and to take from our history in order to build a better future. Now, yes, politics in the last, and that's actually a big contradiction, because the technological revolution made it very much possible for us to access information, to understand complexities, to find the truth through looking at the details and seeing, having all the information in front of us. But at the same time, our political systems and our political dialogues and the media talk about politics became extremely superficial. Politics is no longer a fight over ideas and ideologies. It's much more politics of personas and images and less ideas. And I think that and the reason that I said that we have to tell the truth is because truth is complex. And Israel is still in a process of building itself. And sometimes, and yes, we don't have, you know, even I'm a believer of a two-state solution, and I believe that Israel's security and Israel's future is very much dependent on that question of whether we'll be able to create a two-state solution and have two independent states for Israelis and for Palestinians. And I think that this is the only way to really create a long-term security and long-term peace. I'm honored to have the entire security expertise of every security expert, every former militant, every former intelligence service persons say exactly the same thing. They support the same solution. But yet, this is still a challenge, and it's going to remain a challenge for a few more years. And we have to admit that challenge. We have to tell this complexity. And when I come to the States, and I talk a lot, whenever I can come, and I always try to talk to students, and I always meet this very black and white perception. And I also remember it from being a student. I was a student in London, and the pro-Palestinian campaign at my university was just a nightmare. You enter the university, and the first thing you see is just pictures of bleeding children in Gaza, and you only hear one narrative, and the Jewish society in my university could not even speak loudly about anything. They were always at the corner, not expressing, not telling our narrative proudly, and explaining that yes, there is a complexity, and yes, we are progressive Israelis and progressive Jews, and we believe in peace, but sometimes we have to act And we always have to act for our security first. And yes, sometimes it takes a lot of pain. But this is the complexity of war, and this is the complexity of conflict. And if we don't have the courage to tell this complexity and stand for it, I don't know what's the purpose of education. Education is all about being able to look at the truth and try to constantly search for the truth and criticize what we see in the world. And I think that that's the best way to educate our children and to educate the next generation. And just one last point. Whenever I come here, I only hear one point of view about Israel, and that's the government's point of view. And I think Israeli government's point of view. And I think it's crucial for people here to understand, and it's not only the Jewish community, it's the American community in general, to understand that Israel has an inner discussion about that. And that today it's about 50-50 for the left and the right, even though the right has been winning the elections because of the complex political structure that we have, but it's about 50-50. Over 70% of Israelis believe in a two-state solution. Over 70% of Israelis believe in a separation of religion and state. They want a more religious freedom. They want freedom in general in Israel. Liot am chofshi ba'artzenu, it's part of our national anthem. We still have a majority on that, and Israel is very much divided between these two perceptions and between these two narratives. And we have to explain this complexity, because I think it will give a lot of, ideological weapon in the hands of Israel's defenders here, progressive defenders and protectors here, to talk about the conflict and to talk about the situation in Israel.
Ari.
Yes, first of all, I'm deeply an optimist, Eric. But I think that Jewish optimism, and I would even say Zionist optimism, is based on a very accurate and sometimes cruel diagnosis of reality. That has been our history, and when I'm such a passionate Zionist, the great thing that the mothers and fathers of Zionism did, they saw the problem and they came up with the most remarkable solutions. The same applies to my dear friends, Michael Steinhardt and Charles Bronfman, who launched Birthright. If you remember, they had some difficulties with the Jewish establishment who would not listen to them. But they understood we must make Israel cool again, and they did it in a big way. And I'm such a supporter of Birthright. I think that we have to think of a mega new Jewish project that has to address the problem of 2015 and beyond. And the problem is the tension between the fact that most of our youngsters have universal values and we are perceived as tribal. The secret, and the reason I'm hopeful, that we have this secret weapon. We are a universal tribe. If we prove to youngsters that we can do tikkun olam work while doing tikkun Israel and having ahavat Israel, if we combine the three, the sky is the limit. The sky is the limit. I'm so hopeful about Israel because of Stav. Look at what Stav did in the summer of 2011. Look at what power, and Israel is so impressive. The society is so rich. Israelis are so remarkable. The politics is so flawed. And what Stav managed to do and her movement is to bring that strength. So if we combine the energy and the potential of young Israelis and young American Jews, and we'll do some work together. My own dream is a mega Jewish Peace Corps, where young American Jews and young Israelis do social justice work with Jews and non-Jews in Israel, in the Third World, and in Baltimore and Ferguson. If we do something like that, I think that we can transform the way Israel and the Jewish thing is perceived right now, and will give our youngsters the kind of inspirations they want, and by doing that, we'll save our soul and guarantee our future.
So we don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to talk for a second about the kind of psychology of the way American Reform Jews think about Israel now. Everybody in this room knows that sometimes just to go on Facebook and to see what's in your feed about the conflict can provoke a lot of different feelings. And Ari, backstage, you talked
Especially if you use only Google Translation to understand this Hebrew.
Exactly. And Ari, you talked very eloquently backstage about the kind of inner psychological conflict that you think that young Jews on campus face. They see the dialogue and they feel so many different conflicting feelings about their identity, about the news, about what to be proud of, about what to be critical of, who to listen to, that are very hard to resolve. I know it's hard to be brief on this topic, but can each of you give a little bit of guidance or maybe even diagnosis in the room to what this psychological moment is like for Reform Jews trying to think about Israel? All right, let's start with you.
Well, first of all, talking about the problem you talked about, I think first of all, people are suffering because of the conflict. And while I think older people are more concerned about the church and state issues and the way the reform movement and the conservative movement are treated in Israel, and rightly so, and we should fix it, the main obsession of young people is the conflict. It's so difficult for them to deal with this. And in this sense, it goes back to what you said before. The problem we have that the overprotective approach, the Israel can do no wrong, never did wrong approach, doesn't work anymore. People cannot relate to a kind of Israel cliche that they were given. Israel cannot be about cherry tomatoes and startups and all that. It doesn't, the young people, the millennials, have morality, have social justice, have human rights. They are moral, they are political, they don't bite. They bite up to a point, they don't bite anymore. So the need to we have to do two things. First of all, politically, we have, and this is, I hope, Labour Party and other moderate parties in Israel, we need a new kind of realistic peace concept. We have to understand that the old peace process didn't work. On the one hand, occupation and settlements are unbearable. On the other hand, the utopian messianic approach to peace didn't work. So the first thing we have to do is to do something on the ground that shows that Israel is reaching out to peace, trying to end the conflict, but in a realistic way. At the same time, we have to tell our story because we are not a Goliath. We are a David. When I am going campuses, I tell them we are an underdog on steroids. We are so basically vulnerable. We are a remarkable species and an endangered species. So we should not feel these guilt feelings for Jewish power. The way to fight them is to prove to them that we are about, first of all, that we are a moral minority that has to reach out to other minorities. This image that we are the masters of the world, that we control the world, it's flawed. We have to fight it because we have a problem even with our youngsters who feel guilt feelings because of what they see as Jewish power and Jewish privilege. So I think that combining it, a realistic approach to the peace process, doing work that is social tikkun olam work together, and combining it with a new kind of alliance between your community and ours, where people will be doing work together, will have shared values together, that can change dramatically the way things are.
Stav.
Well, I think that our mutual mission is to make Israel courageous again. That's the mission.
To make Israel courageous again.
To make it a courageous country. Exactly in the way that Israel used to be in its first years and in its first few decades, exactly in the way that Israel can be. And I say courageous because Israel needs to take some very difficult steps if it wants to really make the Zionist dream come true. And for that, we need courage. Now, what I learned a lot from the progressive movement here and from the reform movement here, and that's why it was also important for me to come all the way here, and it's a long way, is because your people always knew how to organize very efficiently around a cause and how to take the ideas and your beliefs and make them reality, to really practice them. And I think that what you did in the last few days here was just beautiful proof of that. To take ideas, very progressive ideas, and to make them come true, to stand with them. And I think that we progressives around the world really have to get together and work together. And what happened in Israel is that my political camp, and that's the criticism, I criticize the right a lot, but I also have, and us leftists, we always have more criticism on our own camp. And in my political camp, what happened to this camp, especially since Rabin's murder, was that the camp just crumbled. All the institutions that our political camp used to have, the institutions that build the future leadership, that bring education, that create the ideological ground for the camp to make politics around, are not there anymore. And we need to rebuild it. And we need to reorganize. We need to reclaiming Zionism and reclaiming patriotism and even Judaism is all about that. What the right has been doing in the last 2 years in Israel, I don't know how much you know about Rabbi Ronsky, Jewish, what do you call that? Minhelet Hazut Yehudit.
Jewish identity.
Jewish identity, authority, administration. It's like a program that the Jewish Home Party, the radical right-wing party in Israel, is trying to bring into schools to educate young children, secular children, and non-Orthodox children, to the kind of Judaism that the extreme right in Israel believes in. A very specific kind of Judaism, not the kind of Judaism that I think every person in this hall believes in. And what we have to do is to fight for that. We have to fight for the definition of Zionism, for the definition of Judaism as well, for the future of Judaism. And this means to be there, to reorganize, to get into wherever we have to get to in order to build this better future for all of us.
Eric.
Great honor to be in this panel. Great honor. 3 very quick points. If you look at the Pew study, I think what you find, my view, is American Jews, all American Jews, are pretty sophisticated about Israel, maybe more so than we give them credit for. You see high levels of support, an important part of their Jewish identity, together with a lot of criticism. They're critical about the settlements. They're critical about the peace process. They're able somehow to combine all of that. That's the way that we are. And this isn't a bad thing. This is a good thing, because we live in a complex reality. My second point is we need a coalition. We need a coalition of moderate Zionists and moderate Jews who are going to work together and change the impressions here. True story about a senior person in your party, I won't mention the name, a number of years ago, came over here and said to me, "Why don't you speak up?" And I said, "Well, fine, but why don't you speak up?" And he said, "Well, I can't come here and criticize my government and criticize my prime minister." So I'm saying, well, how are we ever going to do anything together? We need to, if Prime Minister Netanyahu can call on American Jews to criticize their president, then certainly it should work the other way. We need to find a way to create a coalition where we can talk together here and there about things that concern us. Final point. Let me push you a little bit. I agree, I think, with every word that's been said here. I don't think you appreciate how deeply important to us the issues of religious freedom and religious rights are here. It's not a secondary issue. It's not something that comes later. It speaks to our very identity and who we are. We want access to the wall, and we want it now. We want our rabbis recognized, and we want it now. And we want our institutions supported, no more or no less, but the same way as, every conceivable Orthodox institution and some utterly inconceivable ones get support from the government. So the point here is, what we're saying is, if we're partners, if we're in relationship, and we are, we recognize what hurts you, you recognize what hurts us. Let's create a grand coalition on that issue as well.
So I must respond to that. Eric, I couldn't agree more. What I analyzed the problem that we have on campus, what I want to say, and you can read my Haaretz piece from yesterday. I think that the way I think that these people, and I wrote it, these people who in the name of Judaism are driving away millions of Jews away from the Jewish state are doing something that is despicable. There's no other word. These people who claim to be the ultra Jews, they're endangering the Jewish people. So I'm seen as your partner. The one thing I don't want to see is inter-Jewish isolationism. I want you to be involved with us. I want us to be involved with you. I want you to have the courage and the ability to say what you want, and we have to fight for complete freedom and religious freedom and total recognition of the non-Orthodox movement in Israel. At the same time, I want Israelis to understand the issues you face and help with whatever we can, with affordable Jewish education, whatever issues. I think that only this alliance of the reform movement, of other open-minded movement, we need to combine. We're all about combining Judaism, modernity, equality, and freedom. And we are partners, we are brothers, and we must change the way things are.
So I feel that this discussion should perhaps continue by the pool later. But for now, we're going to close. Thank you. And we're going to close with a message from Israel. And interestingly, it is not a message from a Jew. It's from Ayman Odeh, who is the head of the Joint List, which is the Arab-Israeli party.
Dear friends, I am delighted to have the opportunity to address you today. These are days of great worry for many of us, Jews and Arabs alike. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Our journey will be long and difficult, but hardship will not break our spirit. Guided by a clear moral compass, we will march forward in the path of justice hand in hand. We can choose injustice or we can choose life. تصدق تردوف. نحن سنواصل حلمنا العادل بالنضال.
Thank you so much.